She followed them through the store. A mother, a 3-year-old boy, walking through a giant eagle in North Olmsted, Ohio on a Monday afternoon, buying groceries, living a normal life, not knowing that a woman with stolen knives was watching their every move. Minutes of stalking, waiting, planning, and then, in seconds, everything ended. By shortly after 3 p.m. on June 3, 2024, Julian Wood would be dying in his mother's arms. Blood spreading across a grocery store parking lot. A stranger walking away with a knife still in her hand. This is the story of what happened that Monday afternoon. And what came after. If you believe monsters hide in plain sight and justice must be served for the most innocent victims, like, share, subscribe right now and turn on notification. This case will stay with you, but Julian's story needs to be told. June 3, 2024, North Olmsted, Ohio, a suburb of Cleveland where nothing ever happens, where kids play outside, where people feel safe, where a mother can take her 3-year-old grocery shopping without fearing for his life. Margot Wood, 37 years old, was doing what millions of parents do every day, grocery shopping with her child. Her 3-year-old son Julian sat in the shopping cart, probably pointing at colorful boxes, asking questions the way toddlers do. Julian loved dinosaurs, loved going to school, had an older brother with autism who'd been nonverbal until age 7, and Julian had helped his brother learn to talk. He was everything a 3-year-old should be, curious, happy, full of life. He had no idea that a monster had just walked into the store. Bionca Rochelle Ellis, 32 years old, would turn 33 just 8 days later. She'd just come from the Volunteers of America thrift store next door to the Giant Eagle near Lorraine Road and Dover Center Road. Had walked in, grabbed 2 kitchen knives from the housewares section, concealed them in her clothing, walked out without paying. Then she entered Giant Eagle. No shopping basket, no purse, no list, nothing but those stolen knives and something dark in her mind. The surveillance cameras captured everything. Would later become the most important evidence in the case. Showed exactly what happened. Showed how evil moves through the world looking completely normal until it strikes. Ellis entered the store, looked around, and then she saw them. Margot Wood pushing a shopping cart. Julian sitting in the front seat. A mother and child doing something completely ordinary. And Bionca Ellis decided they would be her victims. She started following them. Not obviously, not close, just following. When Margot turned down aisles, Ellis followed. When Margot browsed sections, Ellis was there. Maintaining distance, staying back, watching. Margot didn't notice. Why would she? It's a grocery store. People walk through aisles. People browse. People exist in the same space without it meaning anything. Except Bionca Ellis wasn't browsing. She was hunting. The cameras showed it clearly. Ellis with her hands in her pockets, where the stolen knives were hidden, moving through the store, eyes fixed on Margot and Julian, not looking at products, not picking up items, just following, waiting. Surveillance video would later show Ellis walking around the store waving a knife in her hand before following Margot and Julian outside. No one stopped her while she was inside the supermarket. At approximately 3 p.m., Margot headed to the checkout, paid for her groceries, pushed the cart toward the exit. Julian still in the front seat, still happy, still safe, still alive. Ellis followed them out. The parking lot was full. Monday afternoon. People loading groceries, pushing carts, walking to their vehicles. Normal suburban life. Margot reached her car, started loading groceries into the trunk. Julian sat in the cart right next to her. Probably tired, probably ready to go home, probably thinking about what he'd do when he got there. He didn't see Bionca Ellis approaching from behind, but Margot did. She turned, saw Ellis walking toward them, saw the knife in Ellis's hand. And in that split second, Margot Wood knew that something terrible was about to happen, knew she had to protect her son. "Oh no, Julian," those were the words Margot said, would later testify to saying. "Oh no, Julian," a mother seeing danger, trying to warn her child, trying to do something, anything, But there was no time. Ellis stabbed at the back of Margot's car first. The trunk, the metal, testing the knife. Then she turned toward Julian. Margot tried to push the shopping cart back. Tried to get Julian out of reach. Tried to do what every mother would do. Put herself between danger and her child. And I got scared, but when I was pushing the cart back, it fell over. Margot would later testify. The cart tipped over, fell. Julian was suddenly vulnerable, unable to run, unable to escape, and Bionca Ellis stabbed him, multiple times. His face, his back. A 3-year-old boy who'd done nothing wrong, who didn't know this woman, who was just at the grocery store with his mom. Julian screamed. Margot grabbed him, pulled him from the cart. The knife caught her shoulder. Ellis stabbing at her too as she tried to protect her baby. Blood, hers, his, everywhere. Other people were running now. Shoppers who'd heard the screams, who'd seen what was happening, who couldn't believe what they were witnessing in broad daylight in a grocery store parking lot. Someone call 911. Oh my God, what is she doing? Voices, chaos, horror, and Bionca Ellis? She just walked away. She just walked away like nothing. Margot would later testify. She just walked away. Margot was on the ground, holding Julian, blood spreading across the asphalt, her shoulder bleeding from where Ellis had stabbed her. But she didn't care about her own wound, didn't care about anything except her son. Julian, baby, stay with me. Stay with mommy. A Giant Eagle employee reached them, tried to help, tried to apply pressure to Julian's wounds. But there was so much blood, so much damage. A 3-year-old's body is so small. The knife wounds were so deep. Shortly after 3 p.m., minutes after the attack, North Olmsted police received multiple 911 calls. Officers were dispatched immediately. Paramedics were already being sent. Officers arrived within minutes, found a scene that would haunt them forever. A mother covered in blood holding her dying child. Witnesses crying, screaming, trying to explain what had just happened. She just walked up and stabbed him, for no reason, just stabbed him. When officers responded to the scene, they found the suspect, Bionca Ellis, walking toward Dover Center Road holding a knife. She was taken into custody without incident. No resistance, no fight, no attempt to run or explain or justify, just compliance. Like she'd known this was coming, like she'd been waiting for it. She was arrested on scene, still holding the bloody knife, still in the same parking lot where Julian was bleeding out. Paramedics were working on Julian and Margot. Julian's injuries were catastrophic. Stab wounds to his face and back. A 3-year-old's small body couldn't withstand that kind of trauma. They loaded him into an ambulance. Lights, sirens, racing to St. John Medical Center. Margot in a second ambulance. Her shoulder wound needed treatment, but she was fighting to stay with Julian. Fighting to be there. Fighting to believe he'd be okay. He wouldn't be okay. At the hospital, doctors and nurses did everything. Everything. Tried to repair the damage. Tried to stop the bleeding. Tried to save a 3-year-old boy who should never have needed saving. But the wounds were too severe. The damage too great. Julian Wood was too small and the evil that attacked him was too strong. Julian Wood was pronounced dead at St. John Medical Center. 3 years old. Went to the grocery store with his mom. Never came home. Margot Wood's screams echoed through the hospital corridors. Medical staff stood outside the trauma room with tears streaming down their faces. Nurses who'd seen everything. Doctors who'd treated countless emergencies. All of them crying. Because this wasn't supposed to happen. Not to 3-year-olds. Not in grocery store parking lots. Not like this. I watched him take his first breath when he was born and his last when he died in my arms, covered in blood. Margot would later tell the court, "The last thing I will ever hear from my son is his scream. I can still see the terror in his eyes, and it haunts me every day." A social worker had to call Julian's father, Jared Wood, had to tell him his son was dead, that Julian had been stabbed by a stranger at Giant Eagle, that Margot was hurt but alive, that their family was destroyed. Jared's response was described by witnesses as devastating. A sound no parent should ever have to make. The sound of a father's world ending. Meanwhile, at the North Olmsted Police Department, Bionca Ellis sat in custody. Silent. Emotionless. Investigators had questions. Lots of questions. But Ellis had invoked her right to an attorney. She wasn't talking. Wasn't explaining. Wasn't showing any remorse or emotion or anything resembling humanity. Detectives didn't need her confession. They had the surveillance footage. Had dozens of witnesses. Had the physical evidence. Had everything they needed to prove Bionca Ellis had murdered Julian Wood. What they didn't have was a reason, a motive, an explanation for why. Because there was no reason. Ellis didn't know Margot or Julian. Had never met them. Had no grievance against them. No history. No connection. She'd just seen them in a grocery store and decided to kill. Random. Completely random. The word that would define this case. The word that would terrify the entire community. Random meant it could have been anyone. Any mother. Any child. Any Monday afternoon at any grocery store. Random meant there was no way to prevent it. No precautions that would have helped. No amount of vigilance that could have stopped it. Random meant evil doesn't need a reason. By that evening, the news had spread across North Olmsted, across Cleveland, across Ohio, across the country. 3-year-old killed in Giant Eagle parking lot. Mother and son attacked by stranger. Random stabbing leaves toddler dead. The headlines were everywhere. Julian's face was everywhere. That beautiful 3-year-old smile. The dinosaur-themed photos. The bright eyes full of life that would never open again. The Wood family posted a statement on GoFundMe. Many of you have been following this horrendous story online and have been asking what happened and how something like this could happen in our own neighborhood. Honestly, we have no explanation as to how or why this happened. It was a random act of violence. There was no prior altercation. They did not know each other. This was a malicious random act. She has devastated our family beyond words. She took something from us we can never get back. The family described Julian. We will continue to share stories about our beautiful baby boy, his laugh, his cheesy smile, his rambunctious attitude, his love of dinosaurs, his love of school, his obsession with his new baby sister and wrestling his big brother every chance he gets, and all the other beautiful things about that sweet little boy. The GoFundMe would eventually raise over $270,000. On June 5, 2024, a Cuyahoga County grand jury indicted Bionca Ellis on 10 charges total. Aggravated murder, 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, 2 counts of felonious assault, endangering children, tampering with evidence, and misdemeanor theft. At her initial court appearance, her bond was set at $1 million. That bond was later increased to $5 million. Cuyahoga County Prosecutor Michael C. O'Malley said in a statement, "This case is truly devastating. I want to express my heartfelt condolences to the family and loved ones of Julian Wood." That night, Margot and Jared Wood held each other. Margot's shoulder bandaged, her body in pain, but none of it mattered, because Julian was gone, their 3-year-old son, their baby, the little boy who loved dinosaurs and helped his brother talk and made them laugh every single day. Dead. Because a stranger at a grocery store decided his life didn't matter. If you're still watching, you're clearly interested in real cases told in full. Like, share, subscribe now, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what comes next. As the shock began to wear off, people started asking questions. Who is this woman? Why did she do this? What kind of monster stabs a 3-year-old in a parking lot? The investigation into Bionca Ellis revealed a long, disturbing history of mental illness. A history of warning signs that were seen but not acted upon. A history of a system that kept releasing a dangerous woman back onto the streets. Bionca Rochelle Ellis was born and raised in the Cleveland area. Her mother, Yolanda Eggleton, would later speak to the media about her daughter's struggles, about trying to get her help, about watching her deteriorate, about the terror of knowing your child is capable of violence. Ellis had been receiving mental health treatment since at least 2014, over a decade of documented psychiatric care. She'd been diagnosed with schizophrenia, a severe mental illness that causes hallucinations, delusions, and disordered thinking. But Ellis's illness wasn't just clinical symptoms in a medical file. It was bizarre, disturbing behavior that escalated over years. The psychiatric hospitalizations. Between 2015 and 2023, Bionca Ellis was psychiatrically hospitalized at least 4 times, each time following the same pattern. She'd stop taking her medication, her mental state would deteriorate, someone would call for help, she'd be hospitalized, stabilized, released. Then the cycle would start again. November 2015. Her mother Yolanda admitted her to a psychiatric facility. Ellis wasn't taking her medications, was having suicidal thoughts, was experiencing delusions, bizarre, disturbing beliefs that had no basis in reality. One of those delusions. Ellis believed she'd been raped and was pregnant. She wasn't pregnant. The rape hadn't happened. But in Ellis's mind, it was real. The doctors stabilized her, put her back on medication, released her. Then it happened again, and again. 3 more psychiatric hospitalizations between 2015 and 2021. All for the same reason. Ellis had stopped taking her medication and was experiencing acute psychotic symptoms. In February 2023, just over a year before she'd murdered Julian Wood, Ellis was a patient at Mortis Taylor Health Facility, a mental health treatment center in Cleveland. But here's what's truly chilling. Ellis's delusions weren't just about herself. They were about children. According to medical records that would later be presented at trial, Ellis had a persistent delusion that began when she was a child herself. She believed she had 23 children. 23 children she'd supposedly had when she was in kindergarten. Ellis would cry about these phantom children, would talk about not being able to find them, would express distress that they were missing. To her, in her psychotic mind, these 23 children were real, were hers, were lost somewhere. The warning signs get worse. As 2024 began, Ellis's behavior became increasingly erratic, increasingly violent, increasingly dangerous. January 2024, Bakersfield, California. Ellis was at a hospital. What she was doing in California, over 2,000 miles from Cleveland, nobody knows. She became combative with security guards, punched them, kicked them, refused to leave when asked. Police were called. Ellis told them she wanted to go to jail for 2 weeks, not because she'd committed a crime, just because she wanted to be locked up. The officers arrested her for battery on security personnel. February 2024, Cleveland, Ohio. Ellis was staying at a homeless shelter. She called police, asked them to come get her, said she wanted to be arrested for a murder conspiracy involving El Chapo, the Mexican drug lord, and the mafia. When officers arrived, Ellis told them she wanted to kill someone and eat their flesh. The exact words she used. Wanted to kill. Wanted to consume human flesh. Like something out of a horror movie, except this was real life and this woman was walking around free. Police took her to Metro Hospital for a psychiatric evaluation. Ellis also confessed, falsely, to murdering someone in Bakersfield, California. She hadn't murdered anyone. It was another delusion, another break from reality. But here's the critical part. Ellis was evaluated, treated, and released. Back to the streets, back to homeless shelters, back to cycling through the system. March 2024, Kissimmee, Florida. Ellis was arrested for trespassing at a hotel. She had no money, nowhere to go, told police she wanted to go to jail. The pattern was becoming clear. Ellis was traveling around the country, getting arrested, asking to be locked up, expressing violent ideation, and then being released to do it all over again. May 2024, North Olmsted, Ohio. Just weeks before she'd killed Julian Wood, Ellis was arrested at Walmart for theft. She'd also violated her probation from previous offenses. On May 30th, 2024, just 4 days before Julian's murder, Ellis appeared before a magistrate at Rocky River Municipal Court. The magistrate saw the red flags, saw Ellis's mental state, saw the danger, and he referred Ellis for a mental health evaluation. But that evaluation never happened. There was no one available to conduct it, no immediate resources, no bed space, no way to force an evaluation without imminent danger. On May 31, 2024, 3 days before Julian's murder, Judge Brian Hagan reviewed Ellis's case. He could have kept her in custody, could have held her until the mental health evaluation could be arranged, could have prevented what was about to happen. But he released her, said she'd have to sit in jail for days on a minor case, said it wasn't justified, said she could go. Bionca Ellis walked out of that courtroom, free, unstable, dangerous. 72 hours later, she'd stab a 3-year-old to death in a grocery store parking lot. The morning of the murder, June 3, 2024, the morning, hours before Ellis would kill Julian, she walked into the North Olmsted Police Department, asked about money or property. Officers interacted with her, saw she was mentally unstable, saw something was off, but she hadn't committed a crime, hadn't made a specific threat, hadn't given them legal grounds to detain her, so they let her leave. And hours later, she stole 2 knives from a thrift store, walked into a giant eagle, stalked a mother and child, and murdered Julian Wood. The mother's heartbreak. After Ellis's arrest, her mother Yolanda Eggleton spoke to the media. Her words were a mix of grief, guilt, and anger at a system that had failed both her daughter and Julian Wood. "I think she was hallucinating," Yolanda said. "The hallucinations and the voices just got the best of her." She described trying to get her daughter help, trying to keep her on medication, watching her spiral. "She recently quit taking her medication," Yolanda explained, "the same pattern that had led to all the previous hospitalizations. But this time, the consequences were fatal. She was around my grandkids," Yolanda said, her voice breaking. "It could have been one of my grandkids. Think about that." Ellis's own mother knew her daughter was dangerous, knew she posed a risk to children, including her own grandchildren. But what could she do? You can't force an adult child to take medication. Can't commit them against their will without meeting strict legal criteria. Can't prevent them from walking out the door. The court system and mental health system failed her daughter, Yolanda said. But more than that, they failed Julian Wood. Because every point of contact, every arrest, every psychiatric hold, every court appearance was a chance to intervene. A chance to keep Ellis off the streets. A chance to prevent a tragedy everyone could see coming. And at every point, the system chose release over safety, chose civil liberties over protection, chose procedure over prevention, until it was too late. The bizarre behavior continues. Even in custody, Ellis's mental illness was on full display. In jail, she was found sitting naked in her cell, eating food with her hands, talking about dinosaurs, the same dinosaurs Julian had loved, the same creatures that had made a 3-year-old smile, now coming out of the mouth of his killer in psychotic rambling. When Ellis was arraigned, brought before a judge for her first court appearance, witnesses described her as mentally ill and smiling. She answered the judge's questions in Spanish randomly, inappropriately, showing complete disconnection from the gravity of what she'd done. One Giant Eagle employee, Griffin Schopf, testified at trial about seeing Ellis after the attack. She was smiling. After stabbing a 3-year-old to death, Bionca Ellis was smiling. The question everyone wanted answered. Was this woman too mentally ill to understand what she'd done? Or was she a cold-blooded killer who knew exactly what she was doing? That question would define her trial, would determine her fate, would decide whether she spent life in prison or in a psychiatric facility. But first, investigators had to piece together what happened, had to understand the mind of Bionca Ellis, had to determine if this was psychosis or pure evil, or something even more disturbing, both. Bionca Ellis was charged with aggravated murder, attempted murder for stabbing Margot, multiple felonious assault charges, endangering children, tampering with evidence, theft, 10 charges in total when indicted by the grand jury. But before trial could happen, The court had to determine if Ellis was competent to stand trial. Did she understand the charges against her? Could she assist in her own defense? Was she mentally capable of participating in the legal process? In July 2024, just a month after Julian's murder, Ellis's defense attorneys filed a motion stating that their client was not able to assist in her defense. They argued she was incompetent to stand trial. The court ordered a formal evaluation, a 20-day psychiatric assessment at North Coast Behavioral Healthcare in Northfield, Ohio. In September 2024, the results came back, and they confirmed what everyone already suspected. Bionca Ellis was not competent to stand trial. The evaluating doctor's report was clear. The defendant is incompetent to stand trial, but there was a critical caveat. There is a substantial probability of restoration to competency within the statutory time frame if provided with a course of treatment. In other words, Ellis was too mentally ill to stand trial right now, but with proper medication and treatment, she could be restored to competency, could be made well enough to understand the proceedings and assist her attorneys. Judge John J. Russo reviewed the report. Under Ohio law, the court had 1 year, the statutory time frame, to restore Ellis to competency. If she couldn't be restored within that year, the case would have to be dismissed or handled differently. But the doctor was optimistic. With medication, with treatment, with structured psychiatric care, Ellis could be made competent. Judge Russo made his ruling. Ellis would be sent to North Coast Behavioral Healthcare for inpatient psychiatric treatment. She would remain there until she was either restored to competency or the 1-year deadline expired. The public was outraged. Ellis was going to a hospital instead of jail? Getting treatment instead of facing trial? How was that justice for Julian? But competency restoration isn't optional. It's required by the Constitution. If a defendant can't understand the proceedings or assist in their own defense, the trial violates their constitutional rights. Can't go forward, can't proceed. So Ellis was transferred to North Coast Behavioral Healthcare, a psychiatric facility, not a luxury resort, not a vacation, but a secure mental health unit where severely mentally ill patients receive intensive treatment. The medication order. There was another problem. Bionca Ellis didn't want to take her medication. Throughout her life, this had been the pattern. She'd be hospitalized, put on medication, stabilize, get released, then stop taking the medication, deteriorate, become dangerous, get hospitalized again, cycle repeat. The doctor treating Ellis at North Coast recommended she be required to take medication. Specifically, long-acting injectable antipsychotic medication, the kind that can't be skipped, that stays in the system, that ensures compliance. But forcing medication on a patient raises serious legal and ethical questions. You can't just inject someone with powerful psychiatric drugs against their will, except in specific circumstances, like restoring competency to stand trial for murdering a 3-year-old. On September 24, 2024, Judge Russo signed an order forcing Ellis to take her medication. The order stated clearly, while at North Coast Behavioral Health, the defendant is ordered to cooperate with all prescribed medications, including long-acting injectable antipsychotic medication. The judge had the authority. The doctor had made the recommendation. Ellis's refusal to take medication had led directly to her violent behavior. The court wasn't asking. It was ordering. Ellis would take her medication, whether she wanted to or not. The 5-month treatment. For 5 months, from September 2024 through February 2025, Bionca Ellis remained at North Coast Behavioral Healthcare. She received intensive psychiatric treatment, the long-acting injectable antipsychotic medication, therapy, stabilization, everything medical science could offer to restore her to competency. The medication worked. Slowly, gradually. The psychotic symptoms that had consumed Ellis, the hallucinations, the delusions, the disordered thinking, began to recede. She started to understand where she was, what had happened, what she was charged with. She could communicate more clearly with her attorneys, could participate in discussions about her defense. On February 11th to 12th, 2025, After 5 months of treatment, competency hearings were held. The doctors testified about Ellis's progress, about the medication regimen, about her current mental state. Their conclusion: Bionca Ellis was now competent to stand trial. She understood the charges against her, understood the legal process, could assist her attorneys in her defense. The treatment had worked. The medication had stabilized her enough. Judge Russo reviewed the evidence, agreed with the doctors. On February 12, 2025, he ruled Bionca Ellis was competent to stand trial. The trial was initially scheduled for July 14, 2025, but there would be more delays, more motions, more legal maneuvering, because Ellis's attorneys had a strategy, a defense, an argument they believed might save their client from the harshest punishment, the insanity plea. When Ellis was first arraigned, brought before a judge for her initial court appearance, she entered a simple plea: not guilty. Standard. Expected. Every defendant pleads not guilty initially. It's the starting point. But in August 2025, just weeks before trial was set to begin, Ellis's defense team filed a motion that changed everything. They were changing her plea from not guilty to not guilty by reason of insanity. The motion, filed by her attorney Fernando Mack, laid out the argument. The defendant initially entered a plea of not guilty at her arraignment. However, based on evaluations conducted, the defendant intends to enter a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. The argument was specific. Ellis did not know, as a result of a severe mental disease or defect, the wrongfulness of her actions. Not guilty by reason of insanity, the most controversial defense in criminal law. The defense that says, yes, my client committed this crime. Yes, she killed a 3-year-old. But she was so mentally ill that she can't be held criminally responsible in the same way. The prosecution had seen this coming, had prepared for it, because Ellis's mental illness was documented. Undeniable. The question wasn't whether she was mentally ill. The question was whether that mental illness rose to the level of legal insanity. Those are the only 2 paths to insanity, and Ellis's defense team believed they could prove one of them. Believed they could show that Ellis's schizophrenia and psychotic symptoms made her unable to understand or control her actions. The prosecution disagreed. Strongly, they believed Ellis knew exactly what she was doing, that her mental illness didn't prevent her from understanding right and wrong, that she made choices, bad choices, evil choices, but choices nonetheless. The stage was set, the battle lines drawn. The trial was scheduled to begin October 1, 2025, with jury selection and opening statements on October 6th. And the central question would be, is Bionca Ellis a cold-blooded killer who, under Ohio law, to be found not guilty by reason of insanity, a defendant must prove one of 2 things. At the time of the offense, due to severe mental disease or defect, the defendant didn't know the wrongfulness of their actions. Or, at the time of the offense, the defendant was unable to refrain from acting due to irresistible impulse caused by severe mental disease or defect, didn't know it was wrong, or couldn't control themselves, deserves life in prison, or is she a severely mentally ill woman who needs treatment, not punishment? The jury would decide. October 1, 2025. Jury selection began. October 6, 2025. Opening statements. The trial of Bionca Ellis, now 34 years old, having turned 33 just days after the murder, began at the Cuyahoga County Court of Common Pleas before Judge John J. Russo. The courtroom was packed. Media, victims' advocates, citizens demanding justice, and in the front row Margot and Jared Wood, there every single day, bearing witness for Julian. The prosecution's case was straightforward. Bionca Ellis deliberately murdered Julian Wood. She stole weapons. She stalked victims. She attacked. She knew what she was doing was wrong. Mental illness is not a free pass to murder children. The defense argued Ellis's severe mental illness prevented her from understanding the wrongfulness of her actions, that her schizophrenia and psychotic delusions meant she couldn't be held criminally responsible in the same way. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. Surveillance footage was shown to the jury. They watched Ellis enter Giant Eagle, watched her spot Margot and Julian, watched her follow them through the store, watched her wave a knife inside the store while no one stopped her, watched her exit behind them into the parking lot. Then the exterior footage. The attack itself, distant and grainy but unmistakable. Julian falling, Margot grabbing him, Ellis walking away with the knife. Several jurors were crying openly. Witnesses testified. Store employees, shoppers who'd witnessed the attack. First responders who'd tried to save Julian. One paramedic broke down on the stand describing the desperate attempts to save a 3-year-old boy. Medical testimony came next. The Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner explained Julian's injuries, the stab wounds to his face and back, the catastrophic damage, what a 3-year-old body experiences when attacked with kitchen knives. The injuries were not survivable, the examiner testified. Cause of death: stab wounds resulting in fatal injuries. Manner of death: homicide. Then came the moment everyone had been dreading. Margot Wood took the stand. She walked to the witness box slowly, sat down, looked at the jury. Her voice was quiet but steady. The prosecutor approached gently. Mrs. Wood, I know this is incredibly difficult. Can you tell the jury what happened on June 3rd, 2024? Margot took a breath, and then she told them about grocery shopping with Julian, about it being a normal Monday, about Julian being his usual happy self, about finishing shopping and going to the car. I was loading groceries, she said. Julian was right next to me in the cart. And then I saw her coming, walking towards us, and I noticed she had a knife in her hand, and I said, "Oh no, Julian." Her voice cracked. That's what I said, because I knew. I knew something bad was about to happen and I couldn't stop it. She described Ellis stabbing the back of the car trunk, then turning toward Julian, Margot trying to push the cart back. And I got scared, but when I was pushing the cart back, it fell over, the cart falling. Ellis stabbing Julian, Margot grabbing him, getting stabbed herself. I grabbed him, tried to pull him away from her. She stabbed me too, in my shoulder, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get Julian away from her. Tears streamed down Margot's face. She stabbed my baby, in his face, in his back. He was screaming, and she just walked away, like nothing. She just walked away. The courtroom was completely silent except for Margot crying and several jurors struggling not to. What happened after? The prosecutor asked gently. I held him, told him it would be okay. That help was coming. That mommy was there. But there was so much blood, and he was getting weaker. Margot paused, struggling to continue. I watched him take his first breath when he was born and his last when he died in my arms, covered in blood. The last thing I will ever hear from my son is his scream. I can still see the terror in his eyes, and it haunts me every day. The defense attorney approached for cross-examination, but there was nothing he could ask, nothing he could say. Attacking a grieving mother would only make the jury hate his client more. No questions, Your Honor. Jared Wood testified next, about getting the call that Julian had been attacked, about racing to the hospital, about the terrible wait, about the doctor coming out to tell them Julian was gone. Now, all of our hearts will forever be missing a piece, Jared said. It is up to all of us to keep his light shining. He described Julian's love of dinosaurs, how Julian had helped his older brother with autism learn to speak, how Julian was obsessed with his new baby sister, how he loved wrestling with his big brother. Julian would have turned 5 on Wednesday, Jared said, referencing the upcoming birthday just days away. He should be in preschool, should be playing and learning and living, but he's gone, because that woman, he pointed at Ellis, decided he didn't deserve to live. The prosecution rested after presenting overwhelming evidence. The defense called psychiatric experts, doctors who'd evaluated Ellis, who testified about her schizophrenia, her psychotic episodes, her history of mental illness, her auditory hallucinations, her delusions. Ms. Ellis suffers from severe mental illness, one expert testified. She experiences command hallucinations telling her to harm people. She has limited insight into her condition. The defense reviewed security video attempting to show that Ellis was disorganized and did not have full control or awareness of her actions. But on cross-examination, the prosecutor challenged these claims. The prosecution presented their own experts, psychiatrists who'd also evaluated Ellis, who agreed she was mentally ill but argued she understood right from wrong. Ms. Ellis knew attacking a child was wrong. One prosecution expert testified. She took steps to conceal the theft of the knives. She selected victims. These actions demonstrate understanding of consequences. The trial continued for days. Testimony, evidence, arguments. On October 15, 2025, closing arguments concluded. The jury began deliberating. They were out for several hours. When they returned, the verdict was read. Guilty, aggravated murder, guilty murder, 2 counts. Guilty, attempted murder, 2 counts. Guilty endangering children, guilty. Felonious assault, 2 counts. Guilty misdemeanor theft, guilty on all 9 charges she faced at trial. The jury had rejected the insanity defense, had found that Bionca Ellis understood what she was doing, that she could control her actions, that she chose to murder Julian Wood. Margot collapsed into Jared's arms, sobbing with relief. After the verdict, Julian's parents briefly spoke to reporters. "This was for him today," Margot said. Prosecutor Michael O'Malley released a statement. "My thoughts and prayers remain with the Wood family." Sentencing was scheduled for October 27, 2025. October 27, 2025, 8:30 a.m. The courtroom was packed again, this time not for a verdict but for sentencing. For the moment when Bionca Ellis would learn what the rest of her life would look like. Judge John J. Russo entered. Everyone rose. Court was in session. Before imposing sentence, the judge gave Ellis a chance to speak, to say something, to show some sign of humanity. Bionca Ellis stood. For the first time during the entire trial, she spoke. "I just want to say I apologize for what I did. That was it." 9 words, delivered in a flat tone. No emotion, no elaboration, no acknowledgement of what happened actually meant. Julian Wood didn't just happen. He was murdered, stalked and stabbed and killed. By her actions, her choices. But Ellis couldn't even say that. Her attorney Fernando Mack had asked Judge Russo to allow Ellis to be eligible for parole after 20 years, citing her history of mental health struggles. The judge was not swayed. Margot and Jared Wood were given the opportunity to address the court, to give victim impact statements before sentencing. Margot stood first, looked directly at Ellis. "I hate you with every fiber of my being," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "You have not only taken away my youngest son, you have caused trauma to my other children. If I want my family to be whole, we need to go to the cemetery." She described what Ellis had stolen from her, from Julian, from their entire family. Jared spoke about Julian, about his light, about how their hearts would forever be missing a piece, about keeping Julian's memory alive. Judge Russo then addressed Bionca Ellis directly. "Ms. Ellis, you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers of aggravated murder and multiple other serious charges. The evidence presented at trial was overwhelming. You deliberately attacked and murdered a 3-year-old child who had done nothing to you, who had his entire life ahead of him." The judge paused. "Your mental illness, while documented, does not excuse your actions. The jury found that you understood what you were doing, that you were capable of making choices, and you chose violence. You chose to end Julian Wood's life." Judge Russo looked at his notes. "I hereby sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the aggravated murder of Julian Wood. This sentence will run consecutively with additional terms for the other charges." He looked up at Ellis. "You will spend the rest of your natural life in custody. You will never again have the opportunity to hurt an innocent child." Bionca Ellis, now 34 years old, showed no reaction, no emotion, just stood there, empty. She was led from the courtroom in handcuffs, out of the public eye, into the Ohio prison system where she would spend the rest of her life. Prosecutor Michael C. O'Malley released a statement after sentencing. In my years as prosecutor, I have seen unimaginable acts of violence, but this is among the most heartbreaking. Bionca Ellis's horrific actions warrant nothing less than life without parole. My thoughts and prayers remain with Julian Wood's family as they continue to grieve this unimaginable loss. Outside the courthouse, North Olmsted police posted a message to their Facebook page thanking the community and expressing continued support for the Wood family. On Tuesday, November 25, 2025, less than a month after sentencing, Ellis's attorneys filed an appeal with the 8th District Court of Appeals. They're asking the court to review the punishment and provide a full transcript. They're challenging the conviction, arguing issues with the competency determination and the rejection of the insanity defense. The appeal will take years, will work through the system, will ultimately fail because the evidence is overwhelming and the conviction is solid. But it means Margot and Jared have to keep reliving this. Keep waiting. Keep hoping that someday, finally, it will be over. The Wood family has also filed a civil lawsuit against Giant Eagle. The lawsuit claims the company and several managers were negligent in providing security to customers at the North Olmsted location. The lawsuit alleges Giant Eagle failed to respond to security concerns, failed to intervene when Ellis was clearly acting suspiciously inside the store, waving a knife around before following Margot and Julian outside. Giant Eagle has not commented publicly. The lawsuit is still pending, and the community continues to ask, could this have been prevented? Ellis had been arrested just days before Julian's murder, had violated probation, should have been held, but she was released. Ellis had visited the North Olmsted Police Department the morning of the attack. Officers saw she was unstable, but they couldn't detain her. No crime had been committed yet. Ellis had a documented history of severe mental illness, of violent ideation, of being a danger, but the mental health system couldn't hold her indefinitely, couldn't force long-term treatment, couldn't prevent what everyone feared might happen. So the system waited, until she did something, until it was too late, until a 3-year-old was dead. The honest answer is, probably not. Ellis's mental illness was documented. But you can't lock people up for being mentally ill. Can't forcibly commit them unless they're an immediate danger to themselves or others. Can't predict who will act on violent thoughts and who won't. The police had no grounds to arrest her that morning. She'd visited the station, asked about property, left. Nothing illegal, nothing arrestable. The store employees saw her acting strangely, saw her with a knife. But in those seconds, what could they have done? Confronted a mentally ill woman with a weapon? Put themselves in danger? The system is designed to protect civil liberties, to prevent unjust detention, to require evidence before action. But those protections mean we can't stop people before they commit violence. Can't intervene before it's too late. So we respond. After. Always after. Julian Wood paid the price for those gaps in the system. And he won't be the last. The community held a 5K race in Julian's honor, called it the Juju Dino Dash, celebrating his love of dinosaurs, raising money for child safety initiatives, keeping his memory alive. The family organized a memory line on Saturday, June 8, 2024, less than a week after Julian's death. They asked community members to line the streets from St. Charles Borromeo Church in Parma to Sunset Memorial Park with Julian's 2 favorite things: dinosaurs and the color green. Hundreds of people came, stood along the route, held dinosaur toys, wore green, showed the Wood family that their community would never forget Julian. Julian's funeral procession featured green decorations and dinosaur themes, honoring what he loved, celebrating who he was before evil found him. Memorials appeared throughout North Olmsted. Stuffed dinosaurs left at the Giant Eagle where he died. Flowers. Notes from strangers. We'll never forget you, Julian. 2 days after Ellis's sentencing, on Wednesday, October 29, 2025, Julian would have turned 5 years old. Margot and Jared marked the day privately, remembering their son, celebrating the time they had with him, grieving the birthdays he'll never have. The GoFundMe created for Julian's family raised over $270,000. The outpouring of support was overwhelming. Strangers from across the country donating, sending messages of love, promising to remember Julian. Margot and Jared have become reluctant advocates. They didn't want this role. They wanted their son. But they used their platform to push for better mental health intervention, better security, better systems to protect children. We can't bring Julian back, Jared has said, but maybe we can prevent another family from going through this. Maybe Julian's death can save another child. They speak about warning signs, about not turning away when someone seems unstable, about demanding better mental health resources, about the gaps in the system that failed to protect Julian. The giant eagle on Lorraine Road remains open. Life goes on. People shop there. But locals remember the parking lot where Julian died, the store where Ellis stalked them. It will always be known as the place where Julian Wood was murdered. Some people avoid it now, can't bring themselves to shop there, can't separate the store from the tragedy. Others go specifically to remember, to leave flowers at the memorial, to stand where Julian fell and promise that he won't be forgotten. Bionca Ellis sits in an Ohio prison. The appeals will fail. She'll die behind bars. Never again will she have the freedom to stalk a mother and child through a store. Never again will she have access to weapons. Never again will she have the opportunity to hurt an innocent child. But that doesn't undo what she did. Doesn't bring Julian back. Doesn't heal the wounds she inflicted on Margot and Jared and everyone who loved that little boy. Justice was served. But justice doesn't resurrect the dead. Julian Wood was 3 years old when he died. He loved dinosaurs. He helped his brother learn to talk. He was curious and kind and everything a 3-year-old should be. He deserved to turn 4. To turn 5 on October 29, 2025. To grow up and go to school and make friends and discover who he wanted to be. Bionca Ellis took all of that from him in seconds of violence in a parking lot. We can't give him back his life. Can't undo what was done. Can't erase the horror of his final moments. But we can remember him. Can say his name. Can tell his story. Julian Wood. Say it out loud. Remember it. Let it matter. Because he mattered. His life mattered. His death should matter too. Not just as a tragedy. Not just as a headline. But as a call to action. A demand for better. For systems that protect children. For mental health resources that work. For intervention before violence instead of punishment after. That's how we honor Julian. Not with tears. Not with anger. But with change. With refusing to let another child die the way he died. The system failed Julian Wood. Failed to stop Bionca Ellis before she could hurt him. Failed to protect an innocent 3-year-old from a monster who walked among us. We can't fix the past. Can't save Julian. But we can learn from his death. Can demand better. Can work to prevent the next tragedy. Or we can move on. Forget. Let Julian become another name. Another story. Another child whose death changed nothing. That choice is ours. Julian Wood. 3 years old. Loved dinosaurs. Helped his brother talk. Died June 3, 2024. In a grocery store parking lot. Would have turned 5 on October 29, 2025. Remember him. And then do something. Anything. To make sure his death meant something. Because if we don't, then Bionca Ellis didn't just kill Julian. She killed the part of us that believes we can protect children. That believes we can prevent evil. That believes tragedy can lead to change. Don't let her kill that too. Subscribe if this case affected you. Share if you believe children deserve better. And then demand change. Real change. The kind that saves the next Julian Wood. Because he's out there. Right now. And whether he lives or dies depends on whether we learned anything from this tragedy. Or whether we just moved on to the next story. If you found this case as disturbing and tragic as I did, please consider subscribing to Crime Case Voices and hitting that notification bell so you never miss when we cover cases like this. A like on this video really helps us continue bringing you comprehensive, well-researched true crime coverage. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.